Okay, so let's talk about COVID now. So we know that there has been some restrictions regarding COVID and what is or isn't allowed as far as evictions in California due to COVID.
Right, and that's a good intro, because what we're doing now is, when we get out of COVID, we're going to be dealing specifically with the Tenant Protection Act of 2019. That's still going to be there, but overlaying the Tenant Protection Act of 2019 is all of the COVID-19 regulations. So what's happened there, again, we're talking very generally, but what happened then was March 16, 2020, we went into shutdown in the state. And the state made that retroactive essentially back to March 1st of 2020. So from the period of time of March 1st, 2020 until October the 5th of 2020, no evictions. Courts were not open to do any evictions. Everybody frozen in place because of the pandemic. Concept there, they don't want people having to move, the dangers of that. So that's how they implemented the protections.
And by the way, we are COVID safe. We are 6 feet apart. We are respecting all of the guidelines regarding COVID.
So the period from March 1st through the end of through the end of August 31st is considered one period of time. Now there's a second period of time from September 1st until January 31st of 2021. That's kind of a second period. The difference is after commencing in September 1st of 2020 through January 31st of 2021, the tenant does have to pay rent, but it's a reduced rent of 25% of the actual amount that's due, provided that the tenant gives notification to the owner that they have had a decrease in their income and somehow related to COVID. Now, the idea is that,
or that they've had to take care of, they have COVID, or somebody in their family has it they're taking care of.
Yeah, there's lots of things. Sick themselves, having to care for parents, family members, having their children out of school. There's just a grouping of lists of reasons why COVID would affect your family. Private business owners, a reduction in business, lots of things like that. So
just to clear, because we're not as smart as you regarding all this, so I just want to make sure we understand. So once somebody from that time period until January 31st, so September 20th through January 31st, because of COVID-related issues, if a tenant can prove that and tells the landlord, they have to only pay 25% of their allotted rent. Do they have to ever pay back the 75%?
And I'll answer that question. I want to just finish that thought. We don't know when that 25% rent is due.
So you never know when it's due.
Theoretically, you would say, hey, you got to pay 25% every month. But the way the statute is written is it says it's got to be paid by January 31st, 2021. Now, there's a big moving target here. Even though you and I are sitting here thinking, January 31st, 2021, it's all over and
that
we're
could
going to
change.
move forward. We don't know when that date's going to be.
Mm-hmm. So in other words, that date can get extended, and we still don't know when the next amount is going to be owed. Now, what about the difference? What about the 75% difference?
Okay, so let me talk about the difference during the first period from March 1st through the end of August. Okay, because you haven't gotten rent then. There was a requirement that the notice to the tenant was given that rent was due, and that notice had to be mailed out to the tenant by September the 30th of 2020. Now the question is, what happens if I own property, the tenant hasn't paid me for March through the end of September? Do I get, during that first period, do I get my rent back? Well, there is an argument that if I didn't give the notice to the tenant to collect that rent, I'm out that rent. I can never ask for it.
And when were they supposed to ask for that? When were they supposed to give the notice?
That notice had to go out by September 30th of 2020.
And what was that notice
That
called?
notice says, hey, you owe me rent from March 1st through this period of time, and notify them of the fact that you want to collect that rent.
What's that form called?
Well, they all have numbers on them, and we're past that time. So giving out the notice now, it's too late. Now, again, we don't know how the courts are going to interpret this. We don't know what the legislature is going to do. They could come back in And even though I'm making these statements at this point in time, tomorrow the legislature could change it and say whatever. But let me tell you, so that's one period. The second period then is like we talked about, September 1st until, at this point in time, January 31st of 2021. That's the second period. How do you collect that rent? Well, here's what the legislature has said. If you've given the proper notice during period 1, and again, during this period, the second period of time, after March 1st of 2021, you can go to small claims court to sue for your back rent for both periods 1 and periods 2. Normally the unlawful detainer, the small claims amount is $10,000.
Okay, for this.
So if you're owed $30,000 in back rent as a result of either not getting rent in phase 1 with a proper notice going out or in phase 2, then you can sue for all of the rent that's owed during both of those periods of time. Now you can, collect the rent. How is that going to help you?
Yeah, because they'll probably just move out and then you go to evict them and they file bankruptcy.
Yeah, there were other issues that, that again were bounced around on the other side. It certainly would be, well, why didn't the government step forward and pay some money? Why don't they help the landowner?
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. Is there anything like that? So now that these owners of rentals, that the property owners that own the note, they're not collecting the rent. Is there anything the government's doing to help them get back that difference? Can they write it off in their taxes?
I think if they're federal loans, I think there may be some assistance that they can get. I think you're seeing lenders at least act like they want to help in some fashion, whether or not we get back to that 2006 recession sort of mentality.
Yes.
Where we lose lots of properties. I wouldn't be surprised that there isn't kind of a step back into that sort of foreclosure event. Especially if we have to go through all of 2021 with some restrictions.
So let's get back to this. So you and I both were in the foreclosure days, right? That's part of when I met you, quite frankly. And first, I'll understand forbearance is when you talk to the bank and you say, "Hey, I'm not able to make my payment right now. Would I be able to, can you hold off on my payment and make it due and payable later?" Whether that's what a forbearance is. Sometimes they put it at the end of the loan. Sometimes they put it, after a few months. Every bank is different. Forbearance does not mean forgiveness. Understand that. The money is absolutely still owed if you do have a forbearance. It also can negatively affect your credit, and it could also allow you not to be able to purchase other properties. So be careful when doing a forbearance. If you don't have to do one, don't do one just to do one. Now let's talk about foreclosures and short sales. Based upon everything that we see happening right now, it's my opinion that there's going to be some backlash with this. I lived through 2008. Properties in East County depreciated around 75%. It was so tragic. In no way do I think it will be anywhere near that. However, with the unemployment rate being what it is, and businesses again, shutting down and not being allowed to operate at full capacity, it's hurting people. We're seeing businesses close down all over the place, and as we know, small business is the heart of America. What do you think? What is your opinion on how this will affect the housing market?
I think some of it's going to depend on what happened really during that recession period of time when so many properties were lost in foreclosure. And again, the idea was that they were going to be putting safeguards in there with regard to lenders loaning money to make sure that people can afford to buy the properties. And hasn't that been amazing? I mean, you talk to people who are trying to go out, who have good credit scores and good money, but maybe they're own their own business and trying to get loans. So on the surface, it looks like the lenders are just making the borrowers go through all of these hoops. And I saw lenders going out looking at properties. I saw one last week out in Discovery Bay where they wouldn't lend because a fence hadn't been repaired. I mean, so what does all that mean? I don't know. I think that again, I think the issue this time, won't be the lack of value in the property. I think it's going to be what you said. People are going to lose their jobs, and they won't simply have the money to pay.
It's very different. So what happened back in 2006, 7, 8 was that banks were selling D and F paper note as A paper. They were doing stated income loans. Anybody could get a loan without having to prove anything, right? So there were so many different reasons for that. Appraisals were going crazy. Within a given of a week, I would see one home appraised for $100,000 more than the week prior, which is just completely, there's no reasoning for that. So those are the main reasons why we had the foreclosures happen, right? Also, people did not have the kind of equity that they have now. They were taking money out of their homes. They were buying boats and cars and things like that. That is not happening now. So right now, more than almost any time throughout history, people have more money in their homes. And there's a huge I just did a video on this. There's a huge high percentage of how many people actually own their homes outright in the United States. And a significant amount of people have 30% or more of equity. So I don't believe that we're going to have the foreclosures and short sales happen like we did, because people that have that much equity will just not throw their houses away. Most likely the government will step in and help, especially with Biden being president, step in and help with them to be able to kind of give them some relief. But we rest assured, in my opinion, we definitely are going to see some type of hit, because you cannot have this amount of people lose their homes and sustain the amount of appreciation that we have. So I personally think that I'm thinking somewhere between 20 and 30% is what we're going to see in a reduction. Although experts and advisors across the country are saying quite different because of the lack of inventory. We also had a surplus of inventory back then, which therefore was another reason why, there was so much supply, the demand was lower. We don't have any supply right now. Inventory is really, really low. Standards to get loans are very, very high, and interest rates are historically low. So all of that looks great. I just sometimes still cannot believe there's got to be something that's going to happen because of this. I just don't know when it's going to happen.
Yeah. Well, I think for an individual buyer buying a home or a piece of property for their own use and their family and that sort of stuff is one thing. And then again, the issue of, people going out in the rental market to buy properties as a business adventure is something different. So I think you're right. I think the wagons will circle around the homeowners, and that'll be a different sort of problem or approach than somebody that's going to discard a rental property because they can't pay for it. And that's the issue about, whether or not the tenants are going to be in a position to resume paying rent. If so, how long? So it's interesting again to me. And we chatted about this just briefly about the burden that the government has placed on owners of property, having them basically substitute as the individuals or entities that are going to provide low-income housing. I mean, when is that an individual owner's obligation to provide low-income housing or reduced housing to people that obviously need it? I mean, to me, that's a governmental function, but in this day and age, I'm sure that it's the pandemic, and it's there's lots of reasons to do what the government has done, but I hope it's not a go-to sort of approach to end homelessness and all the other ills that we have in society, i.e. pass that down to somebody else.
Gotcha. So let me ask you just 2 questions, and then we can wrap it up here. So if somebody is thinking about purchasing rental property right now, what would your advice be as far as what they should watch out for, why maybe it wouldn't be a good idea, why maybe it would be a good idea? And then the next question is, for somebody who has rental property right now that is thinking about, should they be thinking about renting it out or selling it? What would your advice be?
Yeah, if I was going to buy rental property, I would want to have a substantial investment in the property. I've seen a lot of people buy property cash. Now, I don't know where all that money comes from, but I mean, a lot of people all over the world are coming here to the Bay Area to buy lots of property, and cash is not an issue for them. So if I was, 25 years old and I was going to go out to buy properties right now with the low interest rate, I guess maybe in that environment I might take more risk. If I'm, in my 30s, 40s, and I'm trying to build a retirement portfolio, what would I do then? Well, I wouldn't take as many risks. What does that mean? I have to have more cash in the property. And I'd have to be in a position like you were talking about, with some reserves that would allow me to maintain that property. It's like a foreclosure.
Almost like a year. I mean, truthfully, I have seen people be in properties for over a year and almost impossible to evict them. So having a year of reserves for owning a rental is very, very highly recommended, especially given what we have going on right now in the world. Now, if somebody is thinking about selling, why might it be a good idea if somebody, let's just say somebody lives out of state or somebody has rentals locally, why might it be a good idea for them to actually sell right now?
Well, I think the prices, like you were saying, low inventory, prices are good, and interest rates are the best. So, I mean, there are a lot of and a person doesn't want to manage property with the restrictions that are going to be imposed, either the current COVID or continuation of the 2019 tenant protection. But again, then you got to look at what the tax consequences would be of the sale and what are you going to do with it and that sort of stuff. I've seen a lot of people buy properties, attempting, moving out of California, Bay Area at least, to buy properties in other states. You go to Oregon to buy a piece of property, and yes, there's no sales tax, but the reason is there's lots of property tax and lots of other things going on with conditions of properties and repairs and a bunch of other things. I don't think there's any better place in the world than the Bay Area, United States of America, California, and the Bay Area. I love this area. But again, it's got all the growing pains of a little country in itself.
And if you are thinking about selling, you live out of state, or you live in this area, you're thinking about selling, and you do have tenants in there, there are ways to get tenants out. One of them, Richard and I are very comfortable with, or not comfortable with, we know very well, and that's called cash for keys. You can actually pay tenants money. You can incentivize them to move out. If you're going to do cash for keys, you definitely want to make sure you get the help from Richard, because Richard will make sure that you do it the right way and that it keeps you safe. I also have specialized in cash for keys for about 13 different banks and asset management companies, so we know how to do that as well. So reach out to him for any of your real estate needs regarding buying or selling, as far as me needing a financial advisor. Richard, thank you so much. Is there anything you'd like to end with?
Nice to see you again.
I know.
Stay safe.
You as well.
Yeah, and it's a good time to venture out and see what business opportunities are there.
Yes. Would you like to say anything to the camera before you go?
Thanks for the opportunity to spend some time with you. And again, it's what we've talked about today are kind of the general laws for COVID and Tenant Protection Act in a very general way. So if you're having issues that come up, please make sure that you contact your trusted legal advisor to get more specifics, because it's an area with a bramble bush, a lot of thorns, and you want to protect your interests.
Absolutely. And Richard is my go-to guy for this. And anything you need real estate related, we are here to help. Thinking about buying or selling, give us a call at Homes by Krista. Thanks so much for watching. And as always, everybody, make it a great day.